Hey there, this is Natalie, and in this video I want to talk about what happened to Sword King Ghislaine Dedoldia after the mass teleportation incident. A few people corrected me for using the French pronunciation of her name in a previous video. I had actually never heard of anyone being called Ghislaine before, and it looked French to me, so I just read it that way. Obviously I had heard it said in the anime, but it can be difficult to base how you pronounce non-Japanese names on the Japanese voice acting, due to the differences in sounds used between the languages, and I don't watch the dub. But apparently using the French pronunciation was annoying, so I've since checked the katakana used for her name in Japanese, and I'll be pronouncing it in the closest English way to that from now on, which is Ghislaine. Apparently it's not just me though, because in the story I'm going to be covering in this video, there's actually a whole country who can't pronounce her name properly, as you'll see. This is likely to be content that will remain cut from the Mushoku Tensei anime adaptation, given the story I'm going to be telling you here is from an extra chapter to volume 2 of the light novels, and the anime is currently on volume 6. I would expect we'll get some explanation of where Ghislaine has been, and maybe even a brief flashback when we next see her in the anime, but it looks unlikely at this point that this story will be fully included in the show. This is fairly reasonable, given it takes place outside of the main story and doesn't really affect anybody else who features in the story later. But it is still pretty cool, and it was good in the novels to know Ghislaine had survived the teleportation incident and was now trying to find Eris and Rudy, even if we didn't see her again until quite a lot later. Still, if you're watching this video much later than it came out, you'll already know if my guess was right or not about how the anime would handle this stuff. All of this means that the spoiler threat level for this video is a bit vague. I'm expecting this to count as cut content, and it is stuff that has already happened chronologically where the anime is up to. So if you're caught up on the anime, it will be new stuff, but content that probably won't appear in the anime anyway, and it will give you some extra information. But if I'm wrong and this does get shown in some way, perhaps in an OVA or a long flashback or something, then there's still a risk it'll spoil whatever that would be. Still, I won't be going into events after Ghislaine returns to the main story in this video, and I don't think it's a huge spoiler that she will be in the story again at some point, so this won't have any spoilers for future seasons or anything after volume 6 of the novels. Just a quick reminder that if you like this kind of content about Mushoku Tensei, I make regular videos about the series, as well as content about ReZero and other general anime content. So please consider helping me out by subscribing to my channel and clicking the bell to get notified when I upload new videos. And with all of the spoiler warnings and YouTuber stuff out of the way, let's talk about a story that takes place in the central continent of Mushoku Tensei's world, in a place known as the Conflict or Strife Zone, depending on the translation. It's Conflict Zone in the official English versions of the light novels from Seven Seas, but I'm going with Strife Zone because I just think it sounds cooler. This is where we find the country Ghislaine was teleported to, and where she'll eventually become known as a legendary goddess, who will be literally worshipped for generations after the event. The Strife Zone is a region where small countries keep being formed, warring with each other, and being defeated. So it's a region that is in constant political flux, and where war and hardship is considered commonplace. This unstable region never seems to change, given we do get a glimpse of what it's like 100 years later in this very story, but I'll get to that. When the teleportation incident occurs, there's a small country called the Markian Mercenary Country that was founded just 2 years earlier, with its ruler, a legendary mercenary named Markian. This country is, as you would expect from the name, one founded on the basis of having strong fighters, who can be hired by neighbouring countries to assist in their own wars. To achieve this unusual model, it makes sense for the mercenary country to be neutral politically, fighting only for money, and treating its fighters as an export. This is what the mercenaries were all doing before the country was formed. However, now they have a country and territory of their own, they naturally face the threat of other countries coming in to try and expand into their territory, and that's exactly what's happening here. 2 other neighbouring countries, named the Bros Empire and the Bigot Kingdom, have formed a temporary alliance to try to take over the Markian mercenary country, with the expectation being that when they've won this battle with their combined forces, they'll probably turn on each other and fight over who gets the territory. While the fighters of the Markian mercenary country are strong, their tacticians are smart, and their commanders are excellent, they still don't stand much of a chance against 2 countries working together. The country that's only been around for a couple of years is already on the verge of collapse, and so a plan was formed to make its 2 opponents think they're betraying each other early. This is where we meet the protagonist of this story, where this chapter of the novel is told in the 3rd person, unlike most of Mushoku Tensei, and where the point of view character is not Ghislaine herself, but someone she has a huge impact on. He is a captain named Bigot. Yes, that is his actual name. He's been a mercenary his whole life. Both of his parents were mercenaries who died in battle when he was a child, and as an orphan he was sold as a slave and trained up to be a mercenary himself. He has been ordered by Markian himself to take 10 of his men into a dangerous monster-infested jungle called the Aegean Jungle, where nobody would usually set foot, and to use it as cover to sneak up and attack the Bigot Kingdom's camp, while disguised in armour they took from fallen men from the Bros Empire. This is basically a suicide mission, and Bigot knows it. He and his men are not going to return from this mission alive, even if they succeed in what they're sent to do, given their goal is not to win the fight after the sneak attack, but just to have the Bigot Kingdom believe the Bros Empire is betraying them. The forest itself isn't a cakewalk either, having in it monsters that include the B-class red-leaf tiger and the A-class Carentosaurus, a 5-metre-long aggressive lizard beast. But as Bigot and his men are making their way through the forest, they're surprised to find things strangely quiet. They encounter only one monster, a red-leaf tiger, and it has been weakened. Bigot wonders if the tigers and other monsters may have run away, because the even more worrying Carentosaurus is nearby. However, what they find instead of monsters is another group of soldiers, and these guys are also in the armour of the Bros Empire, but they're the real deal. This is naturally a big problem, because if the mercenaries get found out, the whole plan will fail, so they have no choice but to pretend they're deserters from Bros and engage these men in combat, given that dead men tell no tales. Unfortunately, these are not actually ordinary soldiers, but the Emperor of Bros' personal guard, and they're much stronger than Bigot and his men. They're in the forest because the Emperor was visiting a camp nearby, and after a slightly humiliating incident where he sustained a minor injury, he sent his guard into the forest to kill a magical beast and bring back its pelt, for him to claim he slayed it himself and boost morale, or some Kim Jong-un type thing like that. Anyway, things are looking very bad for Bigot. His men have been largely cut down. He's barely managing to survive his own fight, and if they all die here, it will be for nothing, because they won't even have been able to complete the planned suicide mission. He'd managed to convince himself he was willing to die for his country, seeing himself for the first time as something like a knight fighting for honour, rather than a mercenary fighting for money. But here it seems he'll die without even being able to help save his country. But then, suddenly, the fight is broken up by a giant lizard crashing towards them. It is the Carentosaurus, of course, but it's covered in bleeding wounds, and most importantly, it's being pursued by what Bigot thinks is another beast. This beast has brown skin and hair that's coloured red with blood, as well as cat-like ears and a sword with a red blade. He'll notice later that it also has the body of a very buff woman in very skimpy attire, but he'll be way too scared to be aroused. This is our girl, and this is what she's doing just moments after the random teleportation. She's gone into a kind of berserker rage, and she jumps up onto the lizard monster and drives her sword through its head, before jumping down and killing the Bros soldiers. Bigot can only watch, fearing that he'll be next. But then he remembers something. Somebody his sword-fighting master had told him about. The Sword King Ghislaine Dedoldia, who matched this woman in appearance, skill, and in having gone completely berserk. He asks her if that's who she is, and this makes her regain her focus. She looks at him and asks if he's seen a 12-year-old girl with red hair and a 10-year-old boy with brown hair. Bigot says he has not, and then Ghislaine asks where she is. She tells him what's happened, that she was in the Fitoa region of the Azura Kingdom when they were attacked, and then a light came from the sky, and now she's here. She says she needs to head south to return to where she came from and to look for Eris. Bigot tells her that in that direction there's the enemy camp, but she just says anyone who gets in her way will die. Bigot, feeling a new motivation at the thought of fighting by her side, says he'll go with her. His objective was over there anyway. Their goals are different, but they're both fighting for something they want to protect. In his case, his country, and in Ghislaine's, these two kids she's looking for, and so Bigot is proud to be beside her. When they reach the Dikoto camp, things really kick off, because the Bros Empire's camp, when the Emperor's guards never returned, assumed they were under attack, and the whole thing has turned into a three-way battle. But Ghislaine, who's just cutting her way through so she can get on her way, is absolutely decimating people. Bigot takes an arrow to the eye and is looking for the one who fired it to take his revenge when he catches sight of Ghislaine killing the Emperor. Both Bigot and his country manage to survive the conflict then, and it's all because of Ghislaine. She carries on her journey, but doesn't manage to find any sign of Eris or Rudeus, though she does find the bodies of Philip and Hilda, Eris's parents, and so brings the news of their death back with her as she heads back to her former home. Bigot will never know what becomes of her, whether she ever did find the kids she was looking for, or what she did next. But in honour of her saving him, he begins to wear a pendant engraved with a picture of her, and paints the blade of his sword red. Others soon start to emulate this, and in time, the Marchian mercenary country begins to be one where the warriors worship the forest goddess Lane, who they believe comes to the aid of soldiers in desperate situations. Her name, being hard for them to pronounce, is the reason why it's become Lane over time, and those who worship her all wear the pendants engraved with her likeness and carry swords with red blades. This is still the case 100 years later, and this is the only country in the world that believes in the forest goddess Lane. So that's what happens to Ghislaine after the mass teleportation incident. She goes on a berserker rampage and ends up becoming a deity in a country in the Strife Zone, though it seems she never finds out about her own worshippers. What do you guys think of this story? Let me know in the comments. If you want to read it yourself, as I said in the intro, it is the extra chapter at the end of Volume 2 of the Mushoku Tensei light novel, which is available in English from 7 Seas. Thank you, as always, to my supporters on Patreon who are on screen right now. If you want to support my channel, I do have both Patreon and Ko-fi, and there are links to those in the description. Though you can also help me out for free by subscribing to my channel, liking the video, and talking to me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.